All right, good evening. It's Monday, April 22nd, 2019. I'll call the Public Safety Building Committee to order. I know Ms. Cook and Mr. Barry had other commitments tonight. I do think Mr. Moorhead's coming, but we have a quorum and can get going. First item of business is approval of meeting minutes from April 8th. Mr. Barry didn't have a chance to finalize those, so I intend to have that on the agenda for next time. Next item is chairman's update. I spent about an hour on site today with Bill, walking through kind of the latest progress. The last time I had been through the site was when all of us went through that Saturday morning in early March. Looks like a real building. Clearly defined spaces. The first coat of paint on most of the walls. Some had full coats of paint where they were doing some testing of pros and cons of the colors, et cetera. But impressive, the apparatus bay completely, now there's a floor, most of the mechanicals were up on the ceiling. I mean, just kind of like jaw-dropping sort of walk around. So for those of you that did check your email before the meeting, what we're gonna do is there's 2 dates coming up. Monday, May 6th, which is our next meeting date, and the following Saturday, May 11th. So 3:30 on Monday, May 6th, and on Saturday, May 11th, it'll be 7:30 a.m. The police, fire, dispatch departments have also been invited, so as the Board of Selectmen. So I do need to know who's going to what. If you do plan to attend, just so we have a general idea of numbers, given the size that may be walking through the building. We tried to do it after construction crews or before construction crews, as well as try to work around the department shift changes as best we could. So for those, I see some fire personnel. If you haven't gotten an email, you're supposed to be getting an email. All right, so it was decided late this afternoon. So those are the 2 dates and times that will be coming forward.
Thank you.
I just encourage anyone that can make either of those dates. It'll probably be the last time we get to walk through before there's people working in that facility. Just given, I think there's approximately 70 people on site today. That's an active place every day.
That is May 6th, 2:30.
Yep, and then, or Saturday, the 11th at 7:30. And you don't have to let me, I need to know about a day or two before which one you're choosing to do, partake in.
I'm traveling that week, so I won't be here for the meeting as well.
Okay.
But I will be going to the tour on the 11th.
Okay,
I'll make the 6th.
okay. I'll send a few reminders, I'm sure. And then we have a meeting that evening. We'll keep it at 6:30, unless someone argues otherwise. Go ahead.
Any chance for the 11th to be past 7:30?
We're trying to adjust to shift changes. My understanding is police change at a different time than fire,
Yep.
so trying to find a happy medium.
I just feel bad for Bill, he's gotta get up at 4 and get over here.
4?
He could. We'll get the Murphy bed from the trailer.
I heard Mark's an excellent tour guide. Chief Paul is. Let's talk, we can
That's fine,
try to figure something out.
no worries.
Other item, I sent the committee email today. Chief Achilles, new fire chief, is being sworn in next week. He's actually gonna have his first full day of work, then there'll be a ceremony. So all are welcome to join the public celebration, 5:30 at the Senior Center next Monday night, so a week from today. And I've already touched on the tour dates. General updates that I had specifically called out on the agenda. The building signage, we talked about it last time. The planning board is discussing it next Monday night. It's after 2 public hearings, so it probably won't be till late in the evening. I'm not planning to post a meeting. I'm coordinating with Mark from town administration, board of selectmen, and/or representative of this committee to go to answer any questions they have. But they've had the packets for a few weeks now. So thanks to Jeff and Ellen for that. Then the ZBA, which is the approving authority on that issue, they're going to take any feedback planning gives them, but ZBA is then holding a special meeting that Wednesday to hopefully move this forward. So ZBA is on a special meeting just for that issue, so thanks to them for adjusting to kind of get that moving forward. The grease skimmer change order, we had extensive conversation at the last meeting about this. Where you had all left it had authorized myself and a few others from the design team to go have one last discussion with the plumbing inspector, the design team, building commissioner, Vertex, Mark. We had Lisa from the Board of Selectmen as well. Where we landed, I've already communicated this, it was denied. The reason it was denied, I would say, is for a bunch of reasons, but I would say the main reason it was denied was, I think the plumbing inspector was under the impression that it was a 3-bay sink, which was not specified in the drawings. It's a 2-bay sink. The plumbing inspector further gave direction, so we then asked what would be code compliant and not require a skimmer or a grease trap, and we were able to keep the 2-bay sink, but we had to, I believe it was 10 inches. We had to stay within 10 inches in terms of the depth of the sink. So we very quickly grabbed hold of that 10 inches. I think we were at 14 was what the original drawing had asked for. And that's how we're moving forward with that. So that's why it was denied. So that was about a $19,000 item that we felt like we reached a practical resolution, that no one had to skirt or change their opinion of code. At the same time, I firmly believe we're not changing the functionality of how that kitchen was intended to be used. I have not seen the latest drawing yet, though. My understanding is CTA wants it so that
Yeah,
they
there's a
can
little bit
order
of a
it.
discrepancy between, CTA asked for what's called a cut sheet, which is, manufacturers make them. However, this is a build-to-order item, so basically the plumbing contractor typically approaches the manufacturer, who then creates a drawing specific for this application and then sends it to us. But it literally is the same drawing we had previously got for the 14-inch deep sink, just cross out the 14 and write 10. I mean, that's about the extent of it. So CTA wants something officially to come from the manufacturer with that change, and our point of view is you just tell them, just make the sinks 10 inches. So that's still in play, but for all intents and purposes, it's a non-issue at this point.
Any questions on that one? Next one was fire department meeting. So at the last meeting I raised during chairman's update that there had been specific items brought forward to myself, but also Lisa Braccio and Mark from the fire department, just trying to seek additional clarification on certain items. So last Monday night, I met with, it was approximately 12, you can all correct, I would say it was about half the department was there, to just kind of listen to items that they needed clarification on, to understand some concerns that they had raised. I think we boiled a list of about 15-ish items down into one, which will be the vehicle exhaust system, which we'll get to as a separate agenda item, and some issues in terms of the compressor room. So they're putting a new SCBA compressor that was funded via annual town meeting. That is going into the same room as the air compressor for the overall station. So it's two larger machines with different functionalities. Both have the word compressor in them. There were some concerns about working the room with hearing and sound. There was also concern about, does it meet the specifications in terms of electric, et cetera. So I think what we agreed to for that portion is there's plenty of other spaces in that general vicinity that could be reworked just from an operational perspective. So for example, there's an office next door, and this will make a lot more sense when you actually see with the walls up, but there's an office next door that could be certainly repurposed as a workroom for the individuals that have to work on air packs. There's other spaces that aren't currently going to be used when the building's occupied, because remember the intention is that the department grows into the building. to give them, we think that there's enough space for them to adjust to it, but I think the one thing that did come out of it on the compressor side is we did want to make sure that the manufacturer of the Scott compressor machine got into the room and was able to see it and make sure that he or she agreed with the layout. So we are going to work with Vertex to make sure they can get in there and relieve any concerns that may or may not still exist on that. I don't think it's been set up yet. I think we're kind of in a period, right, where we have a new chief starting next Monday too, so making sure that he is brought up to speed on a lot of these items too and can work with the department to resolve some of them, how some of the items were resolved as well. I see members of the fire department here. That's certainly my takeaway from the meeting. For those of you that were there, I'm happy to have, if any of you would categorize it differently or portray it differently.
No,
If you're going to speak, you just have to go to a mic if you're going to. Okay. Any questions from the committee on that specific discussion? Okay. Then I guess we'll probably just move into the vehicle exhaust system. So I will tee the item up. There are plenty of people in the room that can certainly add some color. In addition, I asked Chief Morrow to write a memo to the committee on the specific system that was selected and the reasons why it was selected. But in general, for those of you that aren't in the fire service, there are multiple different ways to capture vehicle exhaust coming out of whether it be a truck, an ambulance, or just a regular motor vehicle. They're obviously in garages where there are living quarters nearby. The current system that they have, for anyone that has been in an existing building, right, is a system that hooks up right to the exhaust pipe that requires manual. You actually physically have to put it on. It doesn't do it for yourself. So every time a truck backs in, it has to be hooked up. Anytime it goes out, it actually comes off as you drive out of the station. The system that has been spec'd in the bid documents for the new station does not hook up directly to the exhaust pipe of the vehicles. It is basically an air recirculating system, as you can probably have read in Chief Morrow's memo. So there is no sort of manual labor that hooks up to the actual exhaust pipe, and it has a whole bunch of other benefits. My view of this specific, whether it be the Plimavent system or the air recirculating system, is there is no perfect system to fully address the concern, which would be vehicle exhaust. I think there are pros and cons to both. So I felt, given that the firefighters who were used to one system, which is the Plimavent system, which is the one that hooks directly up to the exhaust pipe, had raised a concern, I felt it was very important to bring it forward. I also, in the discussion with them, indicated that this is something that had been decided on back in and around November of 2017, so it had been about 18 months, and we were obviously at a critical stage where you heard my opening in the beginning of the meeting, where we're almost ready to move into a station, and it's very hard to make changes, both from a cost perspective, but also a timing perspective in terms of impacting critical path. In addition to having Chief Morrow write the letter, I also worked with Kevin, and I think there's still some information that we can gather depending on where the committee wants to go with this, to understand what our options are, right? If the committee totally wanted to change course, what our options would be. Plimavent systems usually go into to very old stations, very new stations, and can be retrofitted as well. So, it was trying to understand whether there are options on the back end if the system that was spec'd doesn't end up meeting, the needs or the standards that are required. The system that is spec'd is NFPA compliant based on all the documentation that we've been given. And I think there are also alternative systems other than those two systems that could create possible redundancies. So I have some views, but I think I'll just kind of pause and kind of just see if there's any general questions on the opening premise of how I'm opening it, as well as the letter that Chief Morrow sent in. Go ahead. Go ahead. I'll start with John.
So the question, direct source capture system versus the recirculation system.
Yes.
And the one that's in the bid documents is the direct source capture system or the other one?
So air recirculating,
one.
yeah.
And is it fair that the concerns are that the direct source capture system is more effective in removing the emissions? Is that what,
I think so.
Neil?
Do you want to speak to it?
Yes, I
Lieutenant?
So
could.
would it be fair to say that,
Hey, it's
that
on.
there's an opinion, perhaps, I don't know if I can generalize it among the
So,
fire department, that the direct source capture system is a better system for removing the emissions versus the recirculating filter system?
short, direct answer, yes.
Okay.
But let me explain.
I-
So for all
Before
oh.
you get into the science of it,
No,
let me ask you this.
believe me, that's, I'm more an English guy than a science guy.
the direct system has been, it's in the bid documents.
No, the
It's
air
not in the bid
recirculating,
documents,
no.
so to put it in would cost what?
A lot of money, John.
A lot.
A lot of money.
Significant.
But what is a lot?
Above 100,000.
About 100,000. And
The
is
more important part of that is the days that would be added on to
added,
the project.
okay.
If we were to do it under this contract with this,
Right.
So is there, now the science question, is there science that establishes that the recirculating filter system is more effective in removing the emissions versus the direct source capture system?
So in full transparency, the members of the department were not consulted by Chief Morrow about the system to be put into the station.
Okay,
And from the get-go, had we been involved, we would have adamantly been against the recirculator. The only proven system is the direct capture exhaust. It goes to the pipe of the truck starts. When a truck starts cold, the most stuff comes out of it. It goes into that system, it goes up, it gets filtered, it goes into the air, no hazards to the environment. The system that's proposed, what happens is, it's up at the ceiling levels, and when a system gets triggered, truck starts, a sensor goes off, they start, it takes all that product from this level, knee level, brings it up past the body, through the mouth, nose, all the gear, everything, and goes up to the ceiling. This product's great for, if you see the TT units on the road with the stack pipes, it's a great system for that because everything's up top. The thing about it also is that it's a recirculator with a filter. So there's a couple of reasons for this. One, it only filters particles. It doesn't filter gas. So CO gas, NOx oxide, all those environments, they don't get filtered out. They just get recirculated in the environment. And again, it's a closed environment. So again, you're filling up the environment that the firefighters are working on. The other is these systems are very expensive to maintain. They have to be maintained to work adequately. They have to be maintained with the filters changed, which are expensive, and you have to have lifts to get up to them. And they got to be continuously updated and maintained. So I haven't done the numbers from a cost-benefit analysis, but, the upfront cost of the primal event is expensive, yes. But the maintenance of it is very simple and very cheap. Whereas this system may be less expensive to install, but the maintenance in the long run of a 50-year building may outweigh the cost. So our biggest concern, and I mean, it's no surprise to anyone if you've watched the news or Fox 25, is cancer in the fire service is ridiculous, and we get it from everywhere, from what we respond to, the gear that we wear, with the propellants, everything, you name it. The amount of people that die from cancer in the fire service is crazy. And obviously, diesel exhaust, whether it's clean diesel or not clean diesel, it's something that we don't feel that we should be exposed to as fire service members that support the town and be exposed to something just for some dollar figure savings, with the addition that, you know, if we should get cancer, and it's occupational cancer, it's a 111F on-the-duty injury, and the town has to fund that.
The reason I asked for the cost was not to wager the cost.
Oh, no, I don't,
versus
I
no,
don't think
I
this
don't
is
mean
a
that at all.
cost
the
discussion, to be
potential
completely
disease.
honest.
Well, no, I'm just addressing it because there is a cost question, so I'm just, you know,
Let me-
so that we
Can I ask
preemptly.
another question
Go
to
ahead.
the architect? In designing these buildings, in designing recent buildings, is there a particular A, code requirement, or B, preference that you design these apparatus bays in now?
So of all the stations we've done, I can't think of one that we haven't put vehicle tailpipe capture systems into.
So in other words,
we
another
have
way to
done
say that,
stations-
the ones that you are designing have the direct system.
Yeah, that's typically what is requested by the department. And to a large degree, it's almost pro forma in the industry to do that. We have done the ceiling-mounted recirc in addition, but when it came up, we did ask the questions and try to confirm that this was in fact what the client wanted to do, and
Okay.
that's the way they wanted to go, so we let them do it. You know, it's an expensive system, so part of it was, you know, when we were back in the days of looking at cost estimates and things like that, you know, part of it was looking at it
What
from a
is the
cost
delay
perspective,
time
but-
associated with or installing that system now?
If we were to ask CTA to do it, you know, they generally have the materials available to them if you were to get it and try to install it, so it's not like a long lead in general, but I would still say we're talking months of delay.
Months of
Yeah,
delay?
Yeah. Yeah, now, the reality is, can you operate the station in the summertime? Can you move in essentially? Will it actually be a delay to the project, or is it simply just a delay to this one space? So things we've talked about with Vertex and other folks are, you know, while this equipment is being installed, the truck certainly could be outside, while they had the apparatus space, while the guys were working to install the rails and the pipes and the ductwork and the electrical to get this installed. So the fire department could operate from the building, it just wouldn't be as ideal.
It wouldn't be what?
As ideal, you know, because they wouldn't
So
be.
they could move in
they-
and it could
they-
be done
They could move
afterwards?
in, they could have the trucks outside, it's generally nicer weather, so, you're not talking about leaving trucks with water in them overnight in the wintertime, which is the biggest concern. So, it's certainly not ideal, I'd much prefer to have them open a building with what the system that they would like in there, but ultimately, it can be done, and it can be done after the fact. It's just, with this particular contractor, I guarantee you, we're gonna see months of, you know, at least a 1-month delay. I don't know if you have opinions on that, Kevin, and how much additional delay it might be, but I can't imagine it
Given
wouldn't be
electrical
more than a
outlets are
month.
costing us 4 days a time,
Yeah, yeah, I mean, everything at this point. And now, if we could convince them that that the department, everyone could move into the building, it wouldn't be a delay to the project. It would simply just be added work that they were doing while folks were operating within the building. But the system itself doesn't take long to install either. It's probably a couple of weeks,
Then why is it a month?
because you gotta wait for the parts to come in. I mean, it's not a long lead item, so you're not gonna wait months for parts, but you do have to wait a little bit of time for the parts. You have to wait for the contractor to be available, and so that they can actually come out and do the work, and get it all installed. So it may be a month. If things can come together quickly.
Are you on there? Kevin, how many stations have you built that have the system we're putting in, that we're gonna put in this one? Because he
None.
said most of them all have the
None.
direct.
None.
So both of you guys, all the stations that you've put in have had the direct.
Direct vehicle exhaust, yes.
Shouldn't you have pushed harder to the chief then, or did you?
I was not here.
Yeah, we certainly raised the question multiple times in meetings. I mean, it was back when a lot of things were being decided, and We were told that they had visited local station that had it, and that's what they wanted to go with, so.
Now, is this something that could be retrofitted after we put that in and bid out? Would we save more money and incur less loss of time and money? Because every day, you're saying it could be a couple $1,000s, so a month delay is 60,000 on top of whatever we're paying.
Right,
the
that's,
system.
that's a significant consideration when you want to potentially put this under the current contractor's contract. But it is a large enough scope of work that you would have to bid it out as a Chapter 149 project. You'd have to solicit bids, you'd have to do a design. You know, it's not a simple, just get some quotes and go build it, type of thing. So if you did do it with a separate contract, it would basically be a whole new procurement for that. And then there would be extra time waiting for that procurement process to run its course. The other thing you'd open yourself up to, and I don't know if the department has a preference, but there are more than one manufacturer that makes these types of systems, and for public bidding requirements, you would not be able to specify one manufacturer over another. You'd be open bid, and so you'd be subject to whoever got the lowest bid or, you know, lowest qualified bid. So you might not end up with a preference.
But are we also talking about leaving the system that's proposed right now in place and then doing this on top of that?
I don't know what we're talking about.
Well, I think we need, so I think there's a few things. I think the committee needs to understand what the options are. They need to understand the feedback from the fire department. They need to understand Chief Morrow's position. And then, you know, we'll decide where we go, right? I'll kind of lay out what I think the options are at the end. Those things are already hung in the apparatus bay. So if we decided to go to a direct source capture as well, I think we'd be silly to take those things down.
No.
I think
And-
that would,
and-
you get pennies on the dollar, unless someone's telling me you want those things
And it's
taken
not a bad
down.
idea to have them in addition
Yeah.
to it. I
That'd
mean,
be
we've-
great redundancy.
We've done a
Yeah.
lot of work with fire departments and the cancer issue as well, and anything we can do to kind of improve the conditions is better. I mean, it should also be said that we do have CO and NO detector in the garage with an exhaust system that's separate from everything we've just been talking about. So if those levels were to reach an alarm set point, that system would kick on and exhaust the apparatus room as well.
I have a question. From a concern of letting another contract, and I know it's not ideal, is there any chance that the system we already own goes over?
The existing exhaust system from the existing firehouse?
Yeah.
There's always that chance.
It's
And
the
yet-
same vehicles.
The answer would be yes.
Yeah, we've done a lot of buildings in that regard as well, where they've taken pieces or whole, you know, chunks of a system and integrate it.
I mean, I
There's
don't know
always
how
a
that-
little bit of a premium
How
to
old, do you know
that.
how old that system is?
Over 10 years old.
Yeah, we've had it for a while. You know, I mean, again, I don't know, you know, the wear and tear on a system like that. It's a pretty simple system, so I think that'd be more of a question for Plymouth, and I'm sure we can find out if the committee would like us to.
Yeah, so
We've done that already.
the way that system works,
Just FYI.
that's a back-end system. So the bays that are currently scheduled to be back in at the new building would probably be candidates for receiving the existing rails and hoses. But more than likely, given the size of the new system compared to the old, you'll probably end up with a new fan, new ductwork, and obviously electrical to service, and it also requires compressed air as well. So you would save on some of the components, but the drive-through bay is gonna require a drive-through rail, and that'll be a whole new piece of equipment. But you can bring things over.
Besides saving money, I'm just trying to think if contractually that's a better approach. I'm not sure that it is, but
When we were speaking about this, one of the ideas was to have them go over, take a look at the system, see what type of shape it's in. Could it be brought over? There could potentially be, like Jeff was saying, the big issue would be the ladder, because it works on a rail system, not individual systems that they go through. Right now, they do not have a rail system that would fit the entire apparatus space, so that could be looked at either way, but he might be able to bring some of the tracks over to reuse those. But again, you'd already have a system potentially in place, and then this would just be redundancy on top of that.
Right,
He
because
is
they're
looking
right,
at
the
that.
rail may not go to every bay.
No, you don't need the rails for every single bay.
Right.
Usually, the rails are the longest, track that goes in the station, and that's usually set for the ladders when they go out, because their pipes usually change on where they're gonna be located. The small, little sections are usually for engines, ambulances, and other apparatus inside the station.
Depends on which way they operate
Right.
through the station. Do they drive through it, or do they back in? Because you need a different type of rail to handle the
And
different
where's the
traffic.
exhaust on either side compared to where, the boot's gonna fit and everything else.
But the point is a good point. I mean, and I think we probably can research with the vendor that services the current station, whether or not there's a way to procure that under an existing contract of repair, replace, relocate type of thing. I don't know if that's an option. We can investigate that. Incidentally, speak for you, Kevin, but incidentally, I think you spoke to the AG as well to confirm that because this was so late in the game and it's a big dollar value add, just to confirm that we weren't sort of going afoul of any open bidding requirements by just now deciding to plug in very expensive change order for what could be considered proprietary system. We're just gonna pick.
Yeah.
We want this system and put it in at the end, and they confirmed it was okay, right?
Oops, sorry, I'll wait till you finish.
Just go that. Mike, sorry, David, you're all set?
I am, thank you.
Well, two things. Can we take isn't it St. Mark's system now? Aren't we renting that building? I don't know. Number two is, how's the Medfield one working? Do we know? Have we looked into,
From what we've been told, it's
Medfield.
working fine. There've been no issues.
okay, and then I guess the third, the redundant CO2 sensors, can we crank those down so that's constantly kicking on, or can we find a happy medium in there where?
Yeah, so the sensor,
more.
the set point of the NOCO detector can be changed. We have a couple of stations that check it, so it's not, in other words, you're not getting uniform level within the average of the space. You're getting what happens to be at that sensor. So that always can be triggered at a different point. In the beginning, we could have that run at a lower set point if we wanted to. I mean, you could do it continuously over the operation of the building, depending on who's operating it and what they would like it to do. It's simply just a matter of how many times that runs on a regular basis.
But that's completely separate from the,
That's a completely
Research.
separate system.
is that just
yeah.
exhaust?
That's just
straight
an
up?
exhaust system, yeah.
Okay.
What system does, I'm sorry, pardon me, what
Okay.
system does Medfield have? Does it, the system like we haven't?
That's where
research.
Chief Morrow got the idea to put this
That was
system
my
in.
only question.
Yeah.
Can I
Go
go
ahead.
back on the Medfield system? Do you know when it was put in? Anyone?
No, I don't.
I'm just wondering what their experience is on maintenance.
We're gonna find, I'm having
I
Bill call
think
them
their
tomorrow.
system, and the building's 2 years old.
Okay.
Yeah, it's very young. And when we looked into it, it's a pretty, for lack of a better term, dumb piece of equipment. It's a fan with a filter on it.
Just
And
have
a-
to replace the,
and a trigger
replace the filter.
sensor. So you just replace the filters periodically. Now it's a pain in the neck to climb up there. They have ladders, they can get there, but it's a pain in the neck to get there, to get up to where those filters are. But the fan shouldn't have a problem with running for their service life. Yeah, it has to pull the entire volume of the air of the entire apparatus room, or most of it anyways, through the units that would be up in the ceiling. So it just as this as that was said earlier, you basically recirculating the air through the entire space.
Mike, you good?
Yeah, how many are there? How many fans?
Do you remember how
Days.
many we have? How many
So at
units we
least
have?
3
There's-
units.
There's gotta be, I think 3 or 4, yeah,
Just
up
in
there
the
on the
center.
ceiling. And they're in the middle, between the two sets of doors, front and back, they're right in the middle line of the building.
Both systems, certified by the NFPA, is that what it,
Yes.
are they both recognized, or is any?
Well, they don't, NFPA doesn't certify anything, but they do have requirements in NFPA, and I didn't write the memo, so I'm not quite sure what Chief Moore was able to find in NFPA for this. So you'd have to ask him about that, but.
Do you guys know?
My understanding is it's NFPA compliant.
I don't know, do you guys, I mean, from the NFPA compliance, you know what the, yeah, come on.
Scott Navaroli, 1 Bridge Street, as well as member of the department. They both are NFPA compliant, but NFPA is not a licensing/certification company, like an underwriter's laboratory would be. So yes, they all meet a certain standard. However, one does one thing, one does the other. You know, the fan system that's being installed removes particles, but does not remove the CO from the air, where the direct exhaust removes all gases and all small particles directly out of a building. So they're two different units, they do two different things. But unfortunately, by saying it's NFPA compliant, just means that they met the minimum requirements of what needs to be installed. It's not a certification or a licensing of that product itself.
And do we know, I know one of these systems is very loud, you know, you can hear like this, sound like
That's
a
the
whirling thing.
vehicle exhaust
Is
capture.
that's the one that goes up, and that's the one we don't have?
That's correct.
So is that gonna affect the neighborhood up there with, you know, the spout, you know, I know they were talking about
We
air
absolutely will have
handlers
to
in the
go back
back and
with
putting
decibel
the
Yeah,
levels.
I mean,
fencing, so,
the
like,
reality is, we'd ask for the whatever that we can do to get the noise level down, but we routinely do that in just about every fire station, because we practically don't have one that doesn't have a noise issue. They're always near a residential neighbor or something like that. So that's fairly standard for these folks that install these equipment. But that being said, it's still a loud piece of equipment.
With that, if I might, I mean, we currently have the system.
Yeah.
And it's not, you know, ridiculously loud. I mean, it starts on, it's got a kick, it sounds a little loud, and it's an automatic shut off, so it goes for a certain amount of time and shuts off. It really, at this point, after 10 years, it becomes white noise to any of us in the background. You know, it's not, and we can go over and start it any time if you want to hear it. It's not, you know, it's not
my
like a train
concerns
coming
for the
down.
I mean, I'm concerned for you guys, but the neighbors are the ones that
Yeah, no, I
I would be
understand that.
concerned, you know, more.
Yeah, no, completely.
Because, I mean, that, you guys are gonna be working, you work in loud environments all the time, you know, with the sirens going and
Yeah,
everything,
yeah.
but the neighbors, they're there 24/7, and if every call, they're gonna have this big tornado thing going off.
Oh, no, it's not
I've
that
heard
loud.
some of them, but, you know, and I don't know, maybe
Yeah.
it's not a modern one or whatever that are here, but, you know, just wanna make sure that their voice is heard and their concerns are met.
Certainly.
Anything?
No, I assumed the system was gonna be better for you guys, just for two reasons. I assumed that the system went on with the doors open. Do they trigger when the doors open?
There's a sensor in the system that triggers when they get exhaust from the Plymouth van or vehicle exhaust capture triggers when essentially the engine starts.
Because, you know, the exhaust is from leaving and back in, and you don't put the hose back in until,
No, the hoses reach outside the door. So our policy is, when we back up to the station, every member gets out except for the driver. One drives the truck in, the other connects the hose as it gets in. So the exhaust never enters the building without the hose on it.
So how often do you follow the policy?
We do. Obviously, you know, there's times that it doesn't, but that's an operational issue, and that's, you know, with the new chief, hopefully a lot of these standards would be held accountable, and, you know, and obviously, you know, the more educated we get, and the whole department just went through the cancer for the fire service programs, and I don't think one of them is ever gonna not put the hose back on the truck after taking that class.
and then the second thing was just trip hazards, not having as much clutter on the floor. That's what I thought was gonna be a better system, but, I mean, it's obviously up to you guys.
And
If they could design one of these without the yellow spaghetti that hangs down, I think everybody would be
And the rail.
happier,
There's
but.
And the
certainly an
rails.
entrepreneurial opportunity
Yeah.
out there. I think we
I mean,
can
I guess
all
when we're,
agree on that.
right. I mean, when we're canceling out trip hazard, I mean, and I don't know if you've seen them in the station, how they hang and stuff. So it's not, I mean, you can run into them, but it's not necessarily, you know, a tripping hazard. But we've been just so accustomed to them, and I can only imagine, I can image the size of room that we're gonna have to move around compared to the size of room we have now, and it doesn't seem to be an issue for us. I don't know if, you know,
Well-
so.
I just can't believe it hasn't been designed yet, like, where it could have been in the
I know.
floor, in the concrete floor,
Wouldn't that be great?
with slides and stuff like that, you know?
And if I'm imagining this correctly, for the direct vent that we have, as you're telling us that as the truck backs in, someone before it enters into passes over the threshold of the garage, goes up and snaps the
Well, it's,
the
so it's,
hose in place.
yeah, it's like it's like an inflatable cuff.
Yeah.
And then you slide that on, you press a button, it sucks it up instantaneously, and you're back in.
Someone
And the
does it
same
every
when-
time, and I don't know, and is that how it would work in the news station? Same
Yep,
way, would it be
always.
backing in or pulling through?
Yeah, it's the only, either way, because when you drive out, so it doesn't disconnect until the truck has exited the building.
I mean, I'm just thinking
And then
about
backing
the
in.
concern if you get someone standing behind a truck. I assume that's where the exhaust is, behind the truck. I don't know if it can.
Well, it's basically, it's on
the
the side.
Okay.
You know, and that's why we get everybody out of the vehicle. So there's a spotter, there's somebody doing the hose, and somebody with the driver.
But,
So
all right,
it's-
so operationally though, you usually only have 2 people on a truck.
No,
What about the ambulance? Start with the
the ambulance, yes.
All right, so you have a driver, and the driver backs the ambulance in.
Mhm.
You have a spotter, but who's doing the exhausts?
So our policy for 2 people is the vehicle pulls up, it stops, they connect the primal vent, the person moves out of the way. If there's only 2, that person backs the vehicle up, if not. And this is what we've been doing for years, and it
But-
works out fine.
Lieutenant, have you been doing it? Like, you're an officer.
Well, I know,
What
so I know where
percentage
this
of the time do you
comment's
think
coming
it's
from,
done?
because this comment's coming from Chief Morrow, who said that they never connect the hose. That was his whole reason for wanting this system.
there-
And he mentioned it to us directly, so it's, it's transparency. But, from a standpoint of, do we use it? Yes, I'd say 90% of the time we use it. Is there 10% where something backs in, it doesn't get connected, it falls off, people forget? That's natural, but I will say that anybody that sees it off, it gets connected back on. So if I'm balancing out, cancer, and it's been proven, and, the increase in asthma for the 2019 study from the nitrous oxide, all these products, plus the clean diesels, they haven't done full studies on clean diesels of what actually comes out of it. And in the program, the clean diesels are actually setting off hydrogen cyanide alarms? What would they say in the class? Anyways, they're setting off one of the alarms. So there's all these concerns, and so, I mean, as a leader in the department, I wouldn't feel comfortable, requiring my staff to go out there and get in a vehicle and expose to hazards when they're already gonna be exposed to a bunch of hazards. I mean, they're guaranteed to get cancer in their life, I'm guaranteed to get cancer in my life. So whether it's a trip hazard, or whether it's getting out of the vehicle for a couple extra seconds to plug it back in or whatever, I think as a department, we can deal with that, and if we're not, we'll police ourselves. Because it's not just the one guy that's not hooking it up, it's the rest of the people in the station that are getting exposed. So I would think that we can definitely police ourselves on that to make sure that the best system that's on the market is in the best system, in the best building that's gonna be built in this town.
You have a question?
Well, I mean, I think that was, I think this committee's goal right from day one.
Yep.
And we've had over probably 60 meetings, open meetings. We're all approachable. You got comrades in the fire service on this board. Why am I hearing about this now?
Well, and again, I don't know how much you know, but there was an internal committee for the department that was put together by Chief Morrow, and there was a couple of members, a couple of them are here, which he was soliciting advice on building the station. And not too long after the project started, he abandoned that committee, and we didn't hear anything about what was going on with the station. We've learned more
Hang
from
on,
the
let me,
paper.
let me stop you.
I'm just explaining you
No,
what the
hang-
reason.
No, stop. You asked a specific question.
Right.
We're not gonna slander anyone.
It's not a slander, I'm just making sure that
No,
everybody's
stop.
transparent.
Just, no. The question was, we had 60 open public meetings that anyone, whether a resident or not a resident, can come to.
Mhm.
Answer that question. I don't really care about the internal department, what happened or didn't happen.
Well, the chief was our liaison for the department, and, correct me if I'm wrong, but we weren't allowed to go to certain meetings. Everything was to go through him.
Public meetings. Not talking about meetings they may have with the design
Well, I
team.
apologize that we didn't come to public meetings, but we didn't know we were at this situation. Again, we didn't hear about this
Well,
system
I mean, everything
until,
has been laid out in public. We've been on TV, we
Every
couldn't be
meeting's been
more
taped.
we
transparent.
trusted our fire chief to be doing what we
Well,
thought.
you have a duty, you mentioned leadership.
Yep.
You have a duty
Yep.
to your people
And the
to
minute we
look
found
into
out,
things
the minute we
and
found
to
out
make sure they're
about
being
this,
taken care of.
this has been discussion for.
And we have that duty too.
I
And we
understand.
rely on our experts, of which,
Mm-hmm.
we rely on we had our meetings in your building most of the
Mm-hmm.
time. I'm just very offended that this is coming in at the 9th hour. And that you're playing this kind, and I'm concerned too for everybody's safety and their health, of
Mm-hmm.
course. But to get this at the 9th hour, I'm offended, to be perfectly honest with you.
I apologize for that, and actually, Chris Shanahan's been very well. Chris, when was the first time that the fire chief was advised that we wanted a primal vent system?
honestly gonna step back from that, because I don't ever remember having the discussion with him personally. I don't know if you guys did.
Chris, you gotta go to a mic if you're gonna speak, sorry.
I think I know that after all the times I've been here. I personally did not have anything to do with the Plimo event, to be honest. I wish I could say I did. You guys all know what I handled from our aspect. So I really can't answer that. He never mentioned anything to me, so I'm just gonna be honest with you up front. So,
I mean, I know it's not that we're coming here out of no man's land, and same with coming to the chair and having the meeting, which we appreciate, the meeting with Lisa Barcio at the time, and there's a lot of background history that, you know,
No, but
obviously
I
this is not a
understand
forum,
too,
but
but,
this
I
was
mean-
mentioned to him. I know in an officer's meeting, it was mentioned to him a long time ago, and he said we were getting these systems, and we were like, no, we want this system.
Well, yeah,
and-
but there's, even if you don't want to come out in a public meeting, and I get that, you don't want go against the chief, but we're all residents of the town. You could have just, on the side, talked to somebody and say, I'm concerned about A, B, and C.
So
That's what we're here for.
I'll say from experience, that has never worked out for me.
Well, this isn't really working out too well either.
Yep. So, and I don't mean to offend you, and we're not coming here out of the blue. This is with the change in the department over the last couple of months, we now have the opportunity to
I,
speak.
so I would say your chance for that opportunity came when Chief Morrow announced his retirement back in the fall. So personally, where I am really struggling with this, and I've verbalized this to some of you that have reached out to me, is I wore another hat as the chair of the Fire Chief Screening Committee, and about half the department approached me with some very, I'll call it sensitive topics of how the department was being minutia and very serious things. But what I will say is not one person that I spoke to mentioned anything about the building. And I think anyone that has approached me from either department over the course of, I don't even know how long we've been doing this, but a long time, we have brought it back to the meeting. Very much like the second it became, I was made aware of it, went on a public agenda, even tried to meet with everyone ahead of time. So I guess the timing is just really clearly causing a little bit of angst up here, right? But I think, I don't want to speak for everyone else, but I think we want to do the right thing, right? We're not going to build a building
No, I don't.
and have that be what it's remembered for. We've worked way too hard up here for, you know, every hour we spend sitting at this table is an hour we're not with our families. And then there are countless of us that have to do things outside of these meetings to make these meetings actually only be 2 or 3 hours. So the perception of how this is with a week before we have a new chief coming in, where I would propose we take this to make everyone feel like we're handling this appropriately, and I'm open to thoughts, is I think you as a department, have you taken any sort of votes, either whether it's a union or as a department, on this specific issue?
I know that, I don't know about votes, but I know this is the hot topic.
Okay. And can you assure me there's no other issues outside of the vehicle exhaust in the compressor room that remain outstanding within the fire department?
I can't because I wasn't at the meeting on Monday. I was on vacation. Otherwise, I would have attended. But you got my list. I don't know what happened with that list of items, so.
Oh,
Thank you. As I was at that meeting last Monday, those were the only two hot topics. There's been no other talk, there's no other discussions about anything but the ventilation system and the compressor rooms as well.
okay.
I do want to say, while I'm saying up here, to thank the entire committee. You know, I hope that you're not offended, and we apologize that we were not at every single meeting, but there was a communication breakdown, our fault as well as another person's fault. Again, we're not going to use this as a slanderous type situation, but we're here now, you know, and maybe we should have put our best foot forward and come to more meetings, but we also thought we had a representative there that was going to bring all the information back to us. Our mistake for not policing ourselves in that one. But thank you for what you guys have done, and we apologize for the offense to it, but we're here now. So hopefully we can all come to something that, whether it be after the building opens or before it opens. But, thank you.
Go ahead, John.
initially, when the system was being talked about and designed, what was the price difference originally between, was there a big price difference between the direct versus the one that we've gone with? Was it cheaper? Was it more expensive? Was it hundreds of thousands of dollars more for that system the direct system? Was it hundreds of thousands less?
It was
I'm
definitely.
just trying to figure out why we went with this system.
I think the specific reason is because we were requested to by the chief.
Oh, I know, but I'm
But
just
the
trying to find out what,
cost difference is, I'm gonna say somewhere between 75 and 100.
the system we have is more
On the-
expensive?
No, the system that you have is less expensive than the Plymouth system. When, that's about, what about 8K per drop?
Around that.
What was that? I'm sorry.
About $8,000 per drop, which was usually how we referred to each individual vehicle that needs to be installed to it.
I'm just trying to figure out in my own head the rationale why we didn't put this system in originally. So the system, the direct system's noisier and was about $75,000 more.
Yeah. But I think the main reason that
Well, the math
we
doesn't
didn't
add up there.
from
Hang
our,
on, you gotta
Yeah.
do your math again.
well, so the number that Kevin quoted earlier about over 100K includes a lot of other things that, just the difference between one system and the other system doesn't include. So if you add in the electrical costs and the compressed air costs, that increases the difference between the two. So, I mean, I apologize, I was probably too specific when I gave you the number, that was simply just for the vehicle exhaust. I didn't add on because I don't really know what they would add on
That's fine.
in cost, but the electrical component, a little bit of HVAC work, a little bit of roofing work, and the compressed air plumbing work would all add to that total. That was just on the
John.
vehicle exhaust
I mean,
capture.
independent of the timeliness of bringing the complaint forward, the real issue for me was the answer that you gave me, in that every fire station you design with a direct source capture system. So that decision should have been made months and months ago. So that's where I find the issue to be, because had the issue been presented to me or perhaps to this committee as to these two alternative designs, I am certainly persuaded by the unanimity of all the other stations being built and having this system put in. So the fact that the complaint is being brought to us now, while yes, important, the impact of that is a delayed opening if we have this contractor do it, or have it done retrofitted after they move in. Because in my mind, that price, we already were gonna accept that price had it been presented to this committee in the first place.
Well, John, I would say there was discussion about it, is the problem. And my view is that this is an operational decision, and I think that was the view that this committee took back when it was discussed, back in and around November of 2017, that it was an operational decision, much like we've yielded to the chiefs on certain things like radios and certain other operational items. That's where the discussion went, right? And so I would say there was discussion. I don't want anyone to think that this was.
Did we have it at this committee?
Yeah, it would have
I
been the
kinda
building
remember it a little
committee.
bit, but not.
I
to
went
the-
back, I went back because this has taken countless hours of
Yeah.
my, right, and it bothers me the most, I think, just trying to find a resolution, right? Because like I said, I don't want this to be the thing that everyone remembers on the
Right.
back end of the project.
Right.
And I think there's a few things that haven't been said. I've spent a lot of time researching this too, so I'll share a few tidbits before we kind of figure out how we want to move this forward. Is remember, we have, I don't think it matters how many stations they've built with direct source versus air recirculation, because there's countless other of their competitors that do the same thing. I think Jeff said it multiple times, it's what his client asked him to do. It's not necessarily a design of how you create the trust to make sure that the building works, right? So yes, there absolutely probably should have been more communication that, hey, we're gonna undergo a systematic change here in culture, right? I think any of us can agree the fire department doesn't deal well with culture change in general, no matter what town that badge says. So there probably could have been some better communication. Hey, we're going with this system. but we have this system. I think it's how do we find a way to adapt it to our station and decide whether direct source still is the right answer. So we have drive-through bays. My guess is you have an idea of what bay each of your apparatus are going in. But my guess is in the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 months of your building, you're going to swap them around a few times based on how it's, right? Yeah, like, just like you may go in bunk room number 1 the first time and then bunk room number 2 the second time because of X, Y, or Z reason. If we put this system in, right, we're adapting the hoses to the specific apparatus in most instances. We're then gonna have to call back the manufacturer if they decide, oh, we're gonna switch the tower to bay 3 as opposed to bay 2. I think if we make any decision at this point, we are absolutely creating a reactive situation that isn't gonna yield the answers that the fire department is looking for. It's not gonna be fiscally responsible. It's gonna potentially cause delays in other areas of the project that I don't think anyone wants. We have a system that is compliant. We're heading into the summer months. We have a new leader coming on board that can come and assess the situation. And then I think there's another option that hasn't been mentioned tonight, which I'm candidly surprised after we talked about it last week, is there's a third option for captured vehicle exhaust that solely goes with the vehicle's exhaust pipe. And it goes right into the exhaust pipe. There's no tubing. I think there's only one manufacturer. It takes these gentlemen and ladies and our design team out of that discussion. I don't know enough about it. I'm the first one to say I don't know a heck of a lot about vehicles in general, but I think there's more research to be done on it. And if we just say, Kevin, get us a PCO, I think all parties, right, fire department, new chief, and then maybe if this committee, if you need us, but that's an operational item, if you ask me, that's maybe not tied to building construction.
What is this third system?
It basically goes into the exhaust pipe of
So it's a
an engine.
plug?
It's got like a filtration system.
Yeah.
I don't know, I'm just saying, I think everyone needs to look at the options, because I think the other thing that has been out there, right, is the exhaust that's coming out of these engines on scene, which has nothing to do with our building, right? But naturally, when you line up engines at it, right, you've got someone on one side of the engine, which is the driver's side, running a pump panel. Well, they've got the exhaust from the neighboring town's engine right in their face. Like, there was a recent story about, I think there's someone in Worcester.
Yeah. Yep.
Worcester firefighter came up with contraptions to get the exhaust up into the air. So while I am supportive of doing anything that would minimize health and safety hazards, I don't know enough research has been done on it. And I think if the direct source system is the right answer long-term for the department, I feel like this committee and this town will figure out a way to deal with it. I think you also have a great system that would create redundancy if you went down that road. You may do more research. I think you need to go to Medfield. I think, you need to all get in a car, truck, whatever, and head down to Medfield, understand what they're dealing with. I think there's a few other neighboring communities that have installed it into renovation projects, from what I understand. I just think we need to all have a level playing field of what we're working with here, as opposed to, well, we have this system, we should just take it to the next building. That's how I would propose resolve this when we're a week away from a new chief.
I would address that directly, and I think, as the membership, that, yes, we fully agree with what you're saying. And we're not coming in here, and I apologize if it's coming off that way, but to say, well, we want the Plimo event and we want it in the new station. I think, obviously, our concerns is to just make sure that the products that are gonna harm us are mitigated, whatever that system may be. I don't know, even if it could be anything, but if it meets the goal of, exhausting, I mean, a new system could come out tomorrow that's, the best on the market, but, so that's our goal. So I apologize if it came off that we want this system or we're forcing it or whatnot. I mean, it's kind of two-way. You guys are frustrated. We're frustrated as well, and we do appreciate everything that's going on. So I would say, anything that we can work together, union, firefighters, Chief Achilles and the committee, and, anybody else who wants to be involved, to just, figure out a resolve that we can all be comfortable with. I think that's basically what we're just getting at.
So would you be comfortable if we put this on the chief's radar for his first week or so? And
Definitely.
we have a meeting May 6th, which I know he'll be at,
Mhm.
and let him report back to us based on discussions he's had
Mhm.
with all of you and what his recommendation would be?
I think it's very important, and actually, I don't think we would even make a decision without him being totally involved coming in next week. I don't think that would be appropriate, so we're just basically bringing it up for discussion, that you had been nice enough to come in last week, and so
Yeah.
we wanted to speak on it.
Is everyone comfortable with that approach? We'll wait till May 6th. Everyone who hasn't had a chance to meet the new chief, put him.
I mean,
Right.
it makes for a tough first week, but sure, I agree.
And I'll be very, he's been made aware, and furnished with kind of all the documentation too, so that he's developing his thoughts, before, to come in here with. I don't think he's gonna walk in here cold
No,
on May 6th.
probably not.
He's been doing a lot of homework, I think.
He's been hitting the ground running, and he's not even technically employed yet.
Yeah.
So,
So everyone comfortable with that approach?
I
Fire
am.
department comfortable?
Yeah.
Okay. Committee comfortable?
Can we,
Fine,
can we get an order of magnitude, maybe, if we were to put a system in currently under the contract? With all the electrical and mechanical, the compressed air? I know it's not easy, but just a rough,
I think he's told you.
Yeah,
hundreds plus, but
not
an
hundreds of
honest to
plus.
goodness
Yeah.
order of magnitude.
We can ask that question, sure. But we'd have to get,
It's probably
All
gonna
the
come from the
different subs.
design time,
Yeah.
design team, not from the
Yeah.
contractor, because if we wanted to come from the contractor, we'd actually have to issue a RFP.
Right, no, that's fine,
So
that's
we'll
fine.
just ask the various consultants to come up with
Yeah.
what
Well,
they feel like the
So
added
before we
cost.
wait, so the magnitude of the change, just before we waste everyone's time, because that's gonna take a lot of time, right?
Order of
And I think
magnitude
you
is
have
100K.
1,000 other things you need to be dealing with, so they can actually move in. Let me throw it back to the fire department. If further research is conducted, right, and there's a recommendation in this committee, and the committee went forward with a decision to go with a direct source capture system in addition to what's already spec'd for the building.
Mhm.
But the town decided that we wanted to wait, let you get yourself set up in the station, let you figure out where you're actually gonna park this apparatus,
Mhm.
get acclimated to the conditions, et cetera. Is that gonna cause any heartburn?
I would think as long as that we're assured that something's, it's not gonna fall off the radar, I don't see us having an issue with that. We know that there's a timetable you're trying to meet, there's a cost to every day that it doesn't meet that, so we would, there's been options talked about, the trucks park outside in the summer, we figure it out or whatnot, or they have the old school hoses that used to just run out the doors. Well, it's kind of a pain, but for short term, just to, save money, be fiscally conservative, to do the studies that need to be done and do it right, then I don't think we'd have an issue. Basically, it just comes down to just, working together and making sure that the right fix, however we get there. And we'll do whatever we have to do to do our part.
Okay.
I just want to be clear, and to be fair, the resolution of this could still be, we're never going to go with direct venting in that building.
Absolutely.
I just need everyone to understand that. It's not like we're sitting here and our definite plan is to find a way to make it happen. So we're going to look at the whole issue.
Yeah, and I mean, those are things that, down the road, we can meter the building and monitor the building, and make sure that it's still working and all that stuff, I mean, if it comes to that, and again, if it works, then I think we'd be happy with it.
Sorry,
Just
John.
one question for clarification, because it appears I may have misspoken, but we discussed this issue at a prior meeting, and we were informed that you do not spec these on fire departments that you're building now.
Jason made the comment, I'm not sure I actually specifically remember
I don't remember
doing
Jeff's,
it.
no, because the
Okay.
question, that wasn't the question, I believe the question was, I think I asked the chief, do you believe operationally this is the right system? I didn't ask Jeff any questions.
Okay.
To be completely, take you off the hot seat a little bit on that one.
And I think, to be fair, I don't see any problem with what the designers have done. They did what what the chief asked them to
Yeah.
do.
No, I'm not, I'm
Like,
just
I don't
thinking
see a
that
major misstep
I
that you
missed
should-
it then. If the discussion.
John, for all I know, you weren't, like, it might have been a meeting you weren't at.
Yeah,
you
but
know?
it's, I
It,
just-
it was not a long,
And I-
we've talked about it more tonight than we have, I'll be, that abundantly clear to me.
And I don't believe it was talked about in the specificity of comparing one versus another and getting into the detail either.
Yeah.
I think it was just presented as this is the system that they want to do, and you asked the question.
We talked more about the epoxy floor than we did this, you know what I mean?
Talk
So-
more about a grease
I
interceptor
do have a
than.
question.
All right, go ahead, Pete.
If we build the building and we revisit this and we decide to, you know, add the second system, so we have some redundancy, it's probably gonna be cheaper to do that, right? So we don't have to deal with the current contractor and the supervisors.
It's hard to say. I
and
would generally
the
agree with you.
architect and
Yeah,
everybody
I mean, I
else.
would generally agree with you that probably doing it outside of CTA's contract is probably the cheaper route.
Because they put these in systems,
probably
your current system, that's what
Yeah,
they did.
th-
They
these-
retrofitted
they
it to an-
retrofit stations all
So
the
it is
time.
common.
The
It
reality
does
is,
perform well.
you don't necessarily need a design team to do this. You can
Okay.
just hire the vendor and
And my
they'll,
second question would be, can we still pay for that under our, through our wallet that we have now?
As long as the town does the right thing from a procurement perspective, I see Mark nodding his head. We just have to let everyone demobilize and
Right.
decide, right, again,
So at the
allows time
end,
for
if we have-
research, gets everyone
Yep.
on the same page, hopefully, with the right resolution
That's what my question is, exactly, yeah.
related to this building, so.
You may still, I take back what I said, you may still want, because you have to put out an RFP, you have to put out a bid set of whatever specifications that you're asking them to, so you may need something in terms of defining, you know, what circuit the electrical's gonna go to, and how big is the compressed air pipe, and some of these basic details in there. That's about it.
I mean, the compressed air is just for the cuff on each thing, it's not like some
I-
big
yeah, I
giant thing
believe
we
so.
need.
Right, and you have the compressor, so it's
And
simply just
so, yeah, it's
running
not like a big-
whatever extra
Yeah.
lines you need.
And I would say when we retrofitted the building, we didn't put a new compressor on.
Right.
It's certainly not a new compressor in that building. So that didn't, so what was there, maintained. We were able to do it in the outlets that were there. There was space in the panels, so I believe they designed these to retrofit everything. I
Yeah.
mean,
Okay.
Yeah.
So that may be, if it's too expensive one way, it may be an alternative to get it done.
it's, and right, if it's gonna cost a lot less, and
Yeah.
it sounds like it's gonna cost a lot less, then it's a win-win for both sides.
Right.
I
Home
just
run.
don't wanna rush to a decision.
I totally
given
agree with you,
that-
Jason.
All right, so I am not in favor of Kevin doing any more work with CTA on this. Does anyone disagree with me? Right, so I will speak to Chief Achilles. I'm sure the department will be having multiple meetings next week. And I'll outline kind of what the committee's expectation is for the May 6th meeting.
Mhm.
Make sense? All right. 2 other points I'll just point out on this, just based on my research, just so everyone has it. My understanding is the maintenance of the air recirculating is actually less than the annual maintenance on the Plymouth event, because you do have to change out the cuffs and stuff like that. And you can get like a professional maintenance contract, and they would come in with whatever their lifts are. So we're not asking lieutenant or any of the firefighters to actually get up and change the filters. Like, the town should be able to, in its current operating budget, fund that. I asked that specific question. And then 2, your gear room, which I think you referenced would have all this, that's now a separate room, thankfully, right?
Well, it is, but members will probably most likely keep their gear when they're on duty in the apparatus bay floor, because it's, I don't know the system, and, we could potentially change and not all the gear will stay in there. I'm just saying that's what we do now. I don't know the design of the station as it goes for that, but if that's what the policy is and it becomes, then there would be no gear out there.
I think the gear room's at the bottom of the pole, so. All right. Anything else from the fire department on that?
No, I appreciate your time. I apologize. Some things might have come off a little different, but, we're all getting shocked at the same time, so. But I appreciate it, and we do appreciate all the time you guys put in, all the free time. And we understand completely about not being around families, so we understand and we appreciate it.
Thank you. All right. Owner's project manager update. Kevin, I think there's probably 2 items we want to hit, and I don't know if there's any other general updates, but I think it'd be important to have Jeff walk through where we stand on the sprinkler design for the apparatus bay, and what, if any, potential change orders may come out of that, and where that's going, and then maybe just a quick update on the drainage basin tight tank.
Yes.
And then I guess if there's anything else, I don't know what order you want to go in, but
I'll turn over to Jeff.
So generally, and Ellen can get into the specifics, but I think generally where we are is we're waiting on some information from the subcontractor to be able to send everything back to the state. We've gotten the department's information, we've gotten the engineer's information, all responding to comments made by the state, and we're just waiting on the subcontractor to finish their information, which we should get shortly. And that will go back to the state, because the state's doing a review of the sprinkler system. Department felt like that would be the best course of action, so the state's reviewing it. This has to do with the hazard classification of the apparatus room and whether it should be increased or not. And so the design team has, based on the loading information from the fire department, has made an opinion about the hazard classification and does not see a rationale for going to the higher hazard classification. So that's all gonna go back to the state, and the state's gonna be able to make a decision at this point. So if you need more specifics, Ellen can get into the specifics of it, but that's the general update at this point. So if that is accepted by the state, there would not be an extra cost for that. If that is not, then there would be a charge, probably a little bit of a charge from the subcontractor to redesign, because the sprinkler subcontractor actually does a little bit of design work as part of their permit. There'd be a little bit of redesign, and then there would also be the cost of materials installation for the additional number of heads to cover the extra hazard that's there. So there'd be a fairly reasonable change order for that. I do not know exactly what that would cost.
do you have a timeline of when they're gonna get back to you?
The state has been fairly responsive. Do you remember their last
The
response
reviewer is
time?
on vacation. He'll be back on Wednesday or Thursday. The reviewer is on vacation. He'll be back on either Wednesday or Thursday. The application will be ready to go out on Wednesday, given that the subcontractor will be ready, which I've been told he will be.
So to put that into layman's terms, the state signs off, we're good and moving forward. The state delays, even if they sign off or they don't sign off,
We have a problem.
we have a problem because they're ready to start building the sprinkler in the apparatus bay. Or if the state says, no, we want you to change the design, then we obviously have not only a cost, but we have a delay as well.
Yeah. Now, do you know, Kevin, are they proceeding at all with the sprinkler work? Is
I
that-
believe he is, yes.
So I thought I heard that as well. So we believe they're currently piping it as if everything's going to stay the way it is planned. So if there will be a little added cost to thread in new pipe for additional heads. It wouldn't mean they have to redo or scrap what they've done. They just have to add to it to get additional heads.
So I hesitate to ask this question, but is there not a way to get the state to sign off on the design before?
Well, so the way that it works, even though we have an engineer that designs it,
Yeah.
ultimately in the state of Massachusetts, the sprinkler fitters get the permit and actually are the permit holder. So essentially, it's their license, their design.
Yeah.
Even though there's an engineer of record, it's still the sprinkler fitter's design. And so until that person provides the final design, it can't get approved by anybody. So that's what they did back when the project first started, and there's been a lot of back and forth on revisions to their drawings, and eventually, and pretty early on, the department decided that it would need to go to the state to get reviewed, and so it was sent to the state originally, and then there was a lot of back and forth as pieces were missing and other things had to happen. So that's, a lot of other things have pushed us to this point, but they have installed the balance of the system to date under the expectation that it'll all be approved per the original design intent. Which we've not yet encountered a fire station that has had an issue or even the remoteness of this issue developing. We only heard about it on this project because of another station in the state that was raised as
question. So, didn't even know it existed until now as an issue.
Any other questions on that? Tight tank?
So the tight tank, we got a PCO returned to us today. The issue that we're having, and Ellen and Jeff can explain a little bit more, we seem to have a system right now that we have a significant water intrusion problem, that once the tight tank, there's a potential for water to fill the surrounding area of the tight tank, and there's been some concern, and correct if I'm wrong, that the tight tank can actually pull away from the pipes that it's connected to, which would cause okay. I'm just going off what people are telling me, so.
That is what the contractors are afraid of, but that it's gonna
Yeah.
float. But this thing is designed with a ballasted system to not float. So I find it hard to believe that this little amount of water around it is gonna float the tank, but that's what their concern is.
And that's what their concern is, and today we received the PCO, and Ellen, I'm not sure if you
Yep.
saw it,
We got it.
but the cost right now is $17,940.78, with the added time extension of 10 more days.
No, what they,
No.
so the process that we've gone about as the issue was first brought to our attention, is to figure out how to get the water away from the tank. So the first, issue was to install a drainage, which I believe was approved in the last change order we talked about at the last meeting, to push the water away. And from what we can tell, that did not solve the problem. So there was two options at that point. We put another 10-foot section of perforated pipe to push the water even further away, or we go with a full, this is the route that we got the pricing for, the sort of the all-in, do what we know is going to work, which is install a whole separate drainage system for this tight tank area, which is essentially the dry well, which is very expensive and obviously adds time to the area in question. But we don't necessarily know if installing the extra 10 foot of pipe will really solve the problem. It might just reduce it a little bit, but it might not solve it. So it's cheaper and it's less time intensive to do that, but we might just be kicking the can down the road. So you can kind of see the two paths that we've tried to push forward, but we don't really have a good way of going yet.
Do we know there's a problem?
So the water is clearly in the hole surrounding the tight tank, and it infiltrates either across or through the rock that's on the ledge. So it's coming from other areas of the site,
And
underground.
pooling where the
Underground,
tight
and
tank
because
is.
we have a hole right there, that's where it collects. And
Okay,
so we-
and the question is, are we draining it for no reason?
So the plumbing inspector has questioned whether or not we can leave the plumbing connections to this tight tank in the submerged state. And that is an issue for him. And so I believe, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe this entire issue boils down to that.
Yes.
Is the
So
hole around
CTA
this
would
tank?
cover it up.
We would have covered it up if the plumbing inspector, I mean, I'm assuming that the site contractor would have covered it if the plumbing inspector had signed off on it, but they have to sign off on it once they, because it's a plumbing element, before they can allow them to backfill. And then when they saw the hole filled with water, that's when the issue developed.
So once it's not a hole, won't it not be filled with water?
Correct. It'll be saturated soils at that point.
So how are you proposing you resolve this?
So the only two options we have so far are the two that I mentioned, extending the drainage line a little further, which we won't know for sure will solve the problem, but it might, I suppose. It's also a faster resolution, or definitely solving the problem with a much more expensive and time-consuming piece of work.
Or put the dirt in the hole?
Well, we have to get the plumbing inspector's sign-off before we can backfill it. So
So he's seeing a hole full of water, like you're saying. In order to get that water out of there, one option is
And it looks to him like a recurring
add a
problem.
pipe or do the drywall.
yeah, and they have pumped it dry just to see if that was just accumulated water, and once they pump it out, no water will come back, and the water immediately started filling the hole.
It has rained every day.
It rained a lot, and it's not like it isn't just spring, which does have a change in the groundwater level, but I don't know if it's just a confluence of bad events that on any other day
could have passed inspection, backfilled the hole, and it's a non-issue, or this is a much more serious concern. Again, it's another item, we've not ever really seen this ever come up before, where an inspector has disallowed a pipe to be backfilled when the hole has water in it, but
What,
I guess there was a lot of water.
Good list of
so,
references coming out of this project.
yeah.
what's the tank doing? What's
It's
the,
just draining the area around the tight tank. The tight tank is.
Yeah, what's the tight
is-
tank
The
holding?
tight tank is storage for, because we have a septic system, we can't put certain things into the septic system, so a lot of the drains from the garage drains all drain in there.
did it grease trap or?
Yeah, it has a grease intercept before this, it has a grease intercept as well.
We're not bringing that one up.
Where does it go after that? Does it just stay there?
Stay there and it gets pumped out because of the septic
So
system.
how much is the potential fix of just doing a line versus the 17,000 to do a drywall?
I think the line's probably similar to what it cost last time. Was it couple thousand bucks, Ellen?
Well, the other was about 5 or 6.
Oh, it's more than that.
Priced yet.
Yeah, so
So
Mike?
should we assume it would be another 5 or 6 if we went for the maybe solution, and it's 17 for the definite solution? The 5 or 6 has no time?
well, it didn't, the previous one. Now, of course, they're in a situation where they would like to finish and do bunch of electrical work in the same area, and they can't do that until this hole is filled. That leads into paving and ultimately landscaping and ultimately substantial completion. So they have a pathway that shows that this could be considered critical path. I have my issues with it, but that notwithstanding, technically, yes, we need to get it resolved. So I would suggest if we went back with an extra pipe, they might tack a day or two onto it, just because.
So what action would you request of the committee now, given we don't have a formal PCO in front of us, and this is news as of, let's call it 4 o'clock this afternoon?
Me personally, I'd like to see a conversation with the committee about approving the 17,000, which we would know most likely would definitely work. And then it'd be up to us to discuss with CTA.
Well,
You get these things resolved in a timely fashion, how much more critical, or is he just throwing 10 days out? Because one of the comments he made in his PCO is that it's affecting the landscaping.
yeah, well, that's my
Landscaping
comment.
hasn't even been submitted yet.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of things that he's throwing out that we're gonna push right back on him, but that's why I've asked you to, it's time to have a come to Jesus meeting with them and say, I understand
lot
where you're
of these
going with
recently.
this, but these added days don't seem, we can't justify 10 days, let alone 7 days. Does he have time associated with this? Most likely, yes, he does. Is it 10 days? We don't believe it is. But that's what we've been running into. It's, like we told
This could be
you,
the fastest possible change order approved, right, on this project? And could potentially buy goodwill, is what you're saying, to say they could mobilize tomorrow to start dealing with it?
we would, the ultimate goal would be to have them have an answer. I know that Jeff and his consultants are vigorously working on their resolution, and they did a great job turning it around the first time. But it's, this is a problem. Because I see a trend, it's been going on for a while, and it's just, more time.
Well, and let me just be clear on this. The trend that you're seeing is every time there's any kind of a change, there's an add-on for time.
Right, their reasoning in talking to the head of their group was because there's just so many more changes coming. They're focused on certain aspects. We have not been able to really pinpoint what part of the critical path a majority of these are all affecting. But
Right.
they just keep throwing it out to see what's gonna happen, and we responded several times already. You're not warranted that time. But again, it's getting to the point now where here we are almost at the end of April, and, they had a schedule to start moving the trailers and doing site work, but sometimes their answer is, well, it's affecting all of our site work. Well, you weren't doing it all at one time, or else nobody could work on the site. You were doing it in phases, and we'll work with you on the phases aspect, but they haven't been able to show it.
Oh, okay, can we just take a minute on this? Contractually, at this point, they're saying we need time, we need money, and we need time. Every time they hand us a PCO, correct?
Well, there's money in general conditions, which they have not asked for.
Yep.
And there's money associated with each change for for subs and overhead and profit and everything else, but he hasn't asked yet for general conditions, which, quite honestly, if he does get any of these, he'd be entitled to. And the general conditions is his super and everybody else
Okay.
paying for all of it.
So there are three issues. Proposed change order, we need X amount of money to do the work.
Mhm.
We need a number of additional days, and you have to pay the general conditions for those additional days.
Mhm.
Am I,
That's,
If they want to charge
If
us
they
the
want
full
to.
amount.
and
that's basically how it works, but he hasn't asked for general conditions.
contractually, how does this come, suppose we say, we'll give you an additional X number of dollars for the PCO. Go ahead and do it, but we're not gonna give you any more time. Does that all just become a claim that gets either litigated or settled at the end of the,
Which happened at the last meeting.
right?
You guys refused to grant them the additional time. So that is on CTA's list of issues that they have currently with the project.
So that list of potential issues are what, as a lawyer,
So-
I would call potential claims.
Yes.
Potentially, yes. And so the time factor, if you were CTA, you'd be putting your schedule together saying, now I'm told I have to get the project done within the original date. I need the extra 2 days. I don't have them. What are the other ways we can get the project done? And that's what Kevin and I talked to CTA about last Tuesday. And if they are out of all their options, which I'm not sure that they are yet, but if they were, then they'd probably be within their rights to submit a claim.
To
And
submit a
say,
claim and let
You're
that
not
take its course.
you're not playing fair. You can't have it both ways. You can't have everything you need. But I'm not sure if we're there yet on that. But 2 weeks is a long time, and I think there's a lot of issues with the time frame that they've shown us. I don't think it'll be 2 weeks. The other thing, to get back onto Jason's question, is within this PCO, there's a couple of things that are happening. They have to extend the pipe 40 feet to get the new tank that we're gonna put in for this dry well far enough away from the electric stuff that they have to do, that we're not undermining that other work. So, that's about $5,000 in direct costs, so add multipliers to that, it might be closer to 6. Then there is the costs for the dry well itself, the actual piece of, the stuff they have to order and purchase and get installed. And then there's all the labor and mechanical work to get them all connected. So, I mean, one option, if you were looking for options, one option is that we just install the 40 feet that you guys say today. We'll go the 40 feet, which gets us far enough away. It's a length of, pipe with fabric and stone around it, so it's more drainage, 40 feet of extra drainage. And when they put that in, we can see if it solves the issue. That's essentially one of the other options. But that also gets us to the point where we're away from the electrical work, so maybe we're not holding up that work from proceeding. So it gets us out of the time issue a little bit, and if it doesn't work, then we're right where we need to put the tank anyways. So we then get the tank.
We'd run that, then at some point and say, oh, we do need the dry well, or that may drain it enough,
Yeah.
having the extra feet.
Right, I mean, it's a better way of kicking the can down the road, I guess. It's not ultimately gonna be proven that this temporary solution or partial solution works, but at least it gets us away from the issue of holding them up on the electrical work.
The value of kicking the can down the road on that particular issue is that that may create the solution, or be the solution itself.
It may be the ultimate solution, but if it's not, it's part of this solution, so it shouldn't be even more money to come back and finish it off.
And it takes the time issue away.
Now,
Okay.
all of this is speculation, me sitting here just dreaming it up in my head, so I haven't talked to CTA about it, we haven't talked to the subcontractor, there could be other complications, but that seems to me to be a reasonable path forward without committing too much on your behalf to the solution, if you wanted to consider that.
Go ahead,
And there's
John.
no more ledge in that area where the dry well was gonna go.
Not where they think they have to run this, that's what we understand.
We haven't confirmed it, but that's what we're hoping.
So if we went with your proposal of kind of splitting this into two and approved, you tell me what the sum is to get that 40 feet in, that would then bring it within the authority that Mark and I have for a CCD if we had to put a dry well.
That's the other consideration, is you don't actually have to.
Like if something happens between now and 2 weeks that it is very clear we need to do dry well, it would not require kind of another discussion on the same topic.
So because this is a little under 18,000, I'd say you'd have to approve something around 8,000, so that the final cost would be less than 10.
Is everyone comfortable with that approach? So I'll move that we, I'll make it 9.
That gives you a cushion.
Make it 9, right, because we don't want it to go over that amount, right? For the cost of the
I
two
would,
things?
again, just me sitting here speculating, but I would expect that if we do this Part A now and Part B later, that we don't pay extra for Part B.
Okay.
My only question, if I may, Mr. Chair, is, if we were to go with this option right now and approve 9,000 to get the pipe done, what other design, if it doesn't work, Jeff, what other designs have to happen? And then how nothing?
He's got everything he needs. We could have
Including the
today,
dry well?
well, yeah, it's all been given to them. That's
Okay.
how this PCO was
That's
generated.
That's what also seems to be a repetitive item here. It's the designs that they keep going back to CTA for. I mean, it's back to context for it and saying, oh, well, we discussed this option, now we're gonna go down this way, and then people have to redraw things out, and it's not like you snap your finger, I get the drawing right away. My concern would then be, he's still gonna add time later on.
Yeah, so all I'm saying is they have full direction in this PCO to do everything if the committee wanted to vote it. But I say we split it into 2 pieces. We do Part A now, and then if it doesn't work, we immediately start doing Part B. It's gonna have to be a CCD on Part B because you won't have time to come back and meet.
So what's the PCO number?
117.
All right, so I'm gonna move that for PCO 117, we approve $9,000 to start the work for continuing the pipe 40 feet. Is there a second? Who seconded that? John Wood?
Do we have to make note about the delay or not,
Well,
with no delay? Like we
well,
did
I
in the
think we
last
need
one?
to, I think they need to work through that
Yeah,
part for us, because I don't
Like
know.
as a condition
I don't know
of
that-
our- Was that a condition like we did last time, as a condition of our motion?
I think,
Without a delay?
I think what they're saying is, based upon the current proposal of putting in this dry well, that there will be a 10-day extension. But we don't know yet is, if we do the 40 feet, will there be any delay? And that's the piece we
Getting
need to
them out
talk
of
to
that area,
CTA about.
essentially.
Now, we'd also have the option to proceed on a time and materials basis to track that time, with Bill in the field tracking that time, and we'd actually know exactly how much extra time it took, which is helpful when we talk about added time, because they can't just claim it's 10 days. We know exactly how much time it took. So that's another option, but I would say that we don't really have a good answer for that question yet.
I think we're gonna get into schedule in a second, because I think that's like the last piece under this agenda item, but I think we need to trust their judgment of where they know. I could say I don't want any days, but is that fair at this point? Like, the electrical I felt very strongly about, because they didn't message it on the front end. Here, they're messaging on the front end, now the adults have to get in a room and have a conversation.
Right.
All right, so there's a motion, it's been seconded, is there any further discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? All right, that carries unanimously. So before we go into the actual change orders we thought we were gonna work on tonight, we did receive a letter, an updated schedule letter, from CTA. Remember, we held their check, at the last meeting until we got the letter. Other than falling off of my chair when I originally got the letter, I spent about an hour with Kevin and Bill on Friday trying to figure out how they were gonna reply. Officially, it's Jeff and Ellen's job to reply as the designer of record. It was nothing, I would say, new. They were just revisiting the old, so they just ignored the fact that we denied the electrical. They sort of ignored the fact that the grease skimmer had gone off to the side. So Jeff and Ellen, is my understanding, are drafting a letter to kind of write back. But remember, we had one of these letters very early on in the project. It took us getting into a room, and we went from, I think, a almost month and a half delay during phase 1 of the project to 6 days. So I think we just need to, but I would give CTA some credit. They did foreshadow where they thought there may be forthcoming issues. For example, the sprinklers, saying we're putting you on notice now, so I thought that was a pleasant surprise, as much as I didn't like the letter. It was a pleasant surprise that they were being more proactive with some of the things of, if we don't get this drawing by this date, this is what it's gonna do. It also allows us to hold the design team accountable to a certain extent as well, so, just putting that out there. I don't think there's any value in spending the amount of time that I spent with Kevin and Bill going through it here, because I just think you're gonna get frustrated. Anything else on that one? All right, so proposed change order. So let's start with what was presented. Were there any questions on any of those that were in your packet? It was a short list. Change order 10, right, mine? Yeah, that was the glazing and the insignias, right? CO
This
10.
will be the last one. Ellen did a nice synopsis at the end of that. I mean, it's not nice, but it's all there, so you at least see what the last ones we had were.
So that was included in an addendum?
It was an addendum that went out at the same time we got the filed
You
sub-bid
got the bids,
prices,
right.
so it didn't, essentially it didn't apply. Never was in the bid.
Are there any questions on those? Any objections to moving them as one? All right, so I'll move that we accept the change order as presented by Context. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Pete. Any further discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? All right, that carries unanimously. In addition, I received a change order for security revisions. That one came from Jared because Ellen kept pestering him, looking for it.
Right.
It's approximately $20,000 for a bunch of security revisions. The reason you don't have it is I worked with Kevin and Bill to kind of split this, and talked to Chief Paulus as well on some of the items in it to see what we had to have versus what's a nice to have sort of thing, and what could be done now, what can be done after the fact. The confusing part of the change order is we have to pay CTA to do some wiring and masonry work in one area, versus we then have a separate security vendor that's outside of the contract that we actually buy the equipment from. So it's really two things that come together. So what Bill and I did is we boiled it down into basically there's 4 things that are in this change order that I just will walk through. So the first item was to add a camera on somewhere on the front of the building facing out towards the soccer field area, parking lot area. The total cost of that is roughly $8,000 out of the $20,000. Chief, I don't want to put any words in your mouth, but that was kind of a nice to have, not a must have. It didn't relate to necessarily the security of the building, just thought it would be prudent thing to do, just given all the other town items in that area. I think the general consensus from talking to Vertex, and there are maybe some other options that we don't need to do this now, that there's other access to electricity and cabling in the area, that this could be something that's considered down the road. Yeah. So this is something that could be considered down the road. So I'm not bringing that forward for further vote unless anyone had any disagreement on that. The next item is to put a speaker in the booking area, and then a relocation of the camera in the police side of the building. Total cost of that was about $1,600 plus overhead.
That's a microphone, not a
Yeah.
speaker.
A speaker in the booking, and then there's another relocation of a camera somewhere. I don't remember the exact location, but I thought those were pretty self-explanatory and was gonna move that forward. And then the other was adding a camera on the roof, which faces an area that would be accessible from the fire department side out in the, where all the HVAC equipment is. This came at the recommendation of Chief Paulus that there should be a camera on that area, just given the amount of equipment that's sitting up there and just the risk associated with that area. The cost of that is approximately $5,000. We're gonna have to add overhead on top of this, but those are just kind of the general sense of what built up to the 18. The 18 was pretty much, it's like somewhere between 18 and 20. So what I'm looking to get the committee to act on is to approve the speaker in the booking room and the relocation of one camera, which is based on a walkthrough that Chief Paulus had, and then open it up to discussion on the roof top camera, which is obviously a little heftier price of $5,200.
And the soccer one. What about the soccer one?
I personally don't think we should be discussing, I don't think that's a building expense per se. I think that's a town expense that if the selectmen or recreation or
Which one was the town expense? I'm sorry.
the one that faced the soccer field, which-
The one for $8,000?
8+, yeah.
Right, it could, and that feeling's because it's not protecting the building, it's looking at other town assets that are,
You're just using the building to mount it from a
Gotcha.
mounting perspective.
I agree with that.
And we're also looking into potential, is there a wireless option that you don't need all this roughing, et cetera?
That camera wasn't intended to look at soccer games. I recommended to Chief Paulus, it's a pan tilt zoom, and it was gonna be parked. You can park these cameras, so Chief Paulus was gonna park it facing the front entrance. But I found it beneficial in the building we had for our dispatchers. If somebody left the building, was coming into the building, or was hanging around, you can take that camera and focus in and see what someone's doing. It was more of a security issue, not for watching soccer games.
That faces out towards that area. So you're saying that's what the parking is?
Yeah, it was gonna be in the middle of the building, and it would park at the front entrance. Because the chief originally wanted a camera down at the entrance of the building, but the cost of that would have been far more than the cost of this camera, just having a pan tilt zoom.
So this one moves.
Yeah, the dispatcher can move it, the chief could, anybody can move the camera who had
The
access to
camera
look at it.
alone was 4,000, if I remember the quotes correctly.
But I found, like I said, our dispatchers would see somebody sitting in the car for 10 or 15 minutes outside the building, and, the camera angle that they have is just fixed. They can't zoom in and see what that person's doing. In today's day and age, with issues going on in the world.
Is it what is that, internet transaction zone? Would this be part of that? That you have at the current station, right?
Yeah, we do have a zone where the public can come in and do transactions. Until I see the layout, I wouldn't want to designate a spot for that quite yet. But when John proposed it, it certainly makes sense. It, like said, I spoke to Jason, it would certainly be something nice to have if it's not critical. That being said, I realize that, every nice to have, can't be expected, so I'll let you make the decision. On the other portion of the rooftop camera, there's access from both sides to that rooftop. It's an open area. That's where all the, a lot of the mechanicals are located. Just looking ahead for, just liability purposes, people working on that equipment, whatnot, I would highly recommend that you go forward with that. If you have any other questions, I'm here.
So I was planning to move the two minor movements with the microphone and the camera and the rooftop. I was planning to, we can do more research if the committee wants it, but I think the other option seems awfully expensive. I think there's great merit to it, but there's maybe some other options that we could look into before approving something like that.
Yeah, that's something you could get a price on after the project and add it on.
The microphone in the booking room, that's a must-have. We have to have clear communications in there, so.
Okay, so I guess I'll move that we direct Vertex and Context to work with CTA to adjust the proposed change order and make it into a formal change order to remove the front camera facing towards the entryway and approve the remaining portions of the change order. Is there a second to that? Second by Mr. Goodney. Everyone follow that?
Yes.
All right. Any further discussion? All right, all in favor? Any opposed? And then, I should have mentioned it, but it's not gonna change your vote. They did ask for days in that one, right?
4.
But my understanding in talking with Bill is it's not a critical path thing, so what I was gonna suggest, is that we agreed that, especially the rooftop camera, they wanna come back and do that on July 11th. That's fine. If it's gonna cause a critical path and delay them, there's no reason why they can't come back on July 11th as opposed to trying to do it between now and then. Because I don't consider
Interesting.
that a must-have move-in. And I think the two other items the chief asked for, the roof is still, the ceiling grids are in, but there is nothing above them yet. So they should be able to snake the wire. Just that, so I think that's kind of the timing directive. So I don't know that we're agreeing to a time delay, but I think you need to have further discussion, because I imagine most of that time was related to the camera we just took out.
But that would be general conditions that you would be assessed
My guess is they're gonna come back before July 10th and just do it, but
on. Just full
I think it's part, yeah,
transparency.
I get it.
That's all.
They didn't ask for general conditions in their change order, did they?
They did not. However, if we're putting this off and telling them, all right, come back in July 12th to do it, I'm sure they would.
They can do it whenever they
Revise
want.
it.
I think that's what we're telling them.
Yep, that's fine. No problem.
All right, so then the other one is change order 105, which we talked about the last meeting. This was the one where Jeff stood by his drawings, but we were presented with a change order to approve it. We approved it with a 0 cost. When I was in that room today, nothing had been done, so I asked the question to Bill. Do we need to do anything further on that, Kevin, as a committee, or is that now between you, Context, and CTA to figure out how to get that done?
I'm sorry, you're gonna have to refresh my memory.
Detectives room windows,
Oh,
the
I
trusses
think there was
bumping
one.
up, and you had to change out the window. Jeff stood
Oh,
by
yeah,
the
right,
drawings,
right, with the
and we
roof,
said, why are we
sure.
paying if the drawings were good?
Yep.
My understanding is obviously CTA doesn't agree with that assessment,
Yes.
not surprised. We voted a change order with 0 cost.
Correct.
But my understanding is none of the work is now getting done because there's a disagreement between, obviously, your interpretation, which is what we acted on, and CTA's interpretation. So I guess the question is, do you need anything from the committee or any motions or votes, or are you
No.
working through that?
No, we're working through it, but the reasoning also from CTA is that their subcontractors will not do it without the signed change order, which we're gonna have to work through with them saying, here's a signed change order, you just don't like the way it's written out.
The other thing that should be noted, Ellen just mentioned, is that they have done the exterior work.
Yes, the brick stuff.
So
The window
the part
opens there.
that's most critical to getting the building performing as it needs to be is done. Now, the inside, I don't know if the inside drywall or anything has been done yet, so it might look ugly and unfinished. But it wouldn't necessarily, like, if worse came to worse, it wouldn't necessarily stop people from using the room. Yes, we are absolutely going to try to get this thing done and resolved and complete before the end of the project, but the most critical part is the masonry, getting that in before the mason took off.
Okay. Anything else under change orders? All right, so
We have the others we haven't gone through.
They approved the
did a
entire-
blanket
We did 'em
approval
all at
for you.
once.
Oh, okay, we just didn't.
Memo was so self-explanatory.
If you want them to go into detail, I can leave.
We're
Take
getting,
credit for the memo.
we're getting good at this.
All right, so invoices for approval, we have 2 small invoices from UTS that I'll move that we approve as presented. Is there a second?
Second?
Any further discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Meeting schedule, so we're on every 2 weeks, so everyone saw my email, we're going to, it's every second week. We're not gonna try to match up with a second Tuesday, et cetera, and I built this out till the end of June, and at which time we'll have to decide what we do around July 4th. And obviously, that's gonna be probably a pretty busy time for the project as a whole, hopefully not a busy time for us, but remains to be seen.
Okay.
All right, any other business?
Weekly meetings?
Well, yeah, we went almost 2 hours in a unscheduled meeting, so. Anything else? Make a motion to adjourn, is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? All right, we're adjourned, thank you.